I see you. Forever you're in my eyes, I can't.
Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kaylin, and today we're talking about natural childbirth. I have a handful of other videos where I give you advice on how to have a natural childbirth and how to reduce pain during that process. But I thought it was so important to address why would you be interested in having a natural childbirth in the first place. There's definitely a movement of women being empowered and educating themselves on different options during their birth and pregnancy experiences that oftentimes they're not getting told about by doctors and just the traditional medical system. So I am so behind that movement, and I just love that women are kind of taking the power back into their hands and delving into the history of birth. I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated, but just realizing that our bodies really can do this and that you were made to give birth. So I just wanted to give you 10 different reasons why you might want to consider having a natural childbirth. Of course, there are things that happen that are unplanned where you might need pain medication, where you might be transferred from a home birth to a hospital, or where you might need a C-section as well. But I think it's awesome if you want to opt to have a natural childbirth, and I totally think that you can do it. I recently shared the #1 reason why I wanted to have a natural childbirth from the get-go in a recent video, so you can go ahead and watch that if you're curious about why I wanted to have a natural childbirth. But without further ado, let's get into the 10 different reasons why you might want to consider having an unmedicated childbirth. The first reason is that endorphins increase as the pain increases in your body. Your body has the natural mechanisms already in place to help cope with the pain. I've had 2 natural childbirths, one in a birth center and one in a hospital. And yes, I know it's not comfortable, but at the same time, our body is so amazing and has an incredible mechanism to help us cope with the pain by releasing more and more endorphins as the pain increases to help us manage it. Another reason is just having faith that your body was designed by God to do this. The shape and the tilt of your pelvis and how your cervix softens and dilates and how the contractions push the baby and help the baby descend into the birth canal. Aside from just the endorphins, there are all these complex, perfect mechanisms at play to help you give birth to a baby. And one thing that encourages me is knowing that for centuries and centuries, women have been giving birth to babies without any pain medication. I personally had the fear that my body would not be able to birth a child based on certain things about my body, and I go into that in my other video about why I wanted to have a natural childbirth. But as Ina May Gaskin would say, your body is not a lemon. Aside from any rare specific complications, your body is absolutely capable to give birth to a baby, and it was designed to do that. So there are certain risks that come with having an epidural. There's risks with anything. But by opting to not have an epidural or other pain medications, you eliminate those potential risks. If you do have an epidural or do want an epidural and are watching this video, I don't want you to be afraid or anything, but it is important just to be aware of what could happen. There's one thing that's called a spinal headache, where you kind of have this headache after birth based on getting the epidural, and that can kind of detract from your post-birth experience. And then another thing that I have heard actually from women I know in real life is that they have had prolonged back pain from having their epidural. I'm not talking just a week postpartum, but back pain that has continued on with them based on getting the epidural. And I really hope that if you get that, that does not happen to you, but that is a potential risk if you do opt for the epidural. As we know, the epidural kind of numbs you from the waist down. So one thing that you'd gain from skipping the epidural would be to be able to be more active after you give birth. I can't compare that to having one, but I mean, granted, I was still like waddling and sore and uncomfortable, but it was nice to have that free movement after giving birth. Another plus to having an unmedicated childbirth is that your baby is more alert after birth. Any medication in your bloodstream when you are in labor is getting transferred to your baby. So those medications are getting into your baby's system. So by not getting the epidural, you're avoiding getting those medications into your baby's system. And that can cause the baby to be more alert as well because they're not hindered by any of these medications in their little bodies. Pain medications, I know besides the epidural, like Demerol and all the different ones that they offer, can lower your blood pressure, and it can actually cause respiratory depression for both you and your baby. I've also heard a lot of women reporting that they felt nauseous or dizzy or just really sick from different pain medications that were given to them, and I don't think anyone wants to feel nauseous or dizzy during their birthing experience. Along with the baby being more alert, what goes hand in hand with that is having an easier time breastfeeding. Again, none of these things are hard and fast rules, but they're just things to consider. You definitely can breastfeed successfully if you have an epidural or pain medication. I'm not saying that you can't, it just makes it a little bit easier because the baby is not hindered by those medications. I've heard they can just be kind of a little bit sleepier and more out of it after giving birth if you did have those pain medications. I'm very grateful that I had successful latching and breastfeeding experiences after I gave birth to both of my babies, and that just went really smoothly. So that is just a factor to consider. Again, I 100% know you can be incredibly successful at breastfeeding even if you have an epidural. It's just a little something to consider. If you don't have the epidural, you have freedom of movement to move around during your labor and cope with the pain that way. Movement was huge for me in terms of coping with the labor, in particular moving my body into a bathtub, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I had the epidural, and that was one of the most helpful things to me, was moving my body and being in the water in terms of coping with the discomfort from being in labor. So obviously if you're kind of paralyzed from the waist down, you're not going to be able to move around, and you're also only going to be able to push from your back because you can't move. My first baby I did birth on my back because I just couldn't get myself into any other position come the end of it. And my second baby I birthed squatting, and that was definitely way easier. I wasn't squatting, I was actually kind of on all fours kneeling on the bed, so half squatting, leaning forward, and that was extremely helpful. And movement in general is incredibly helpful for labor, and just those movements really help to work your baby down into the birth canal. So it's so nice to be able to change positions, to be able to walk around, to be on a birth ball, to be in the tub. Those things are just amazing at helping your body give birth. Along with that, you are more likely to have a shorter labor if you do not have any pain medications, and there are different reasons for that. Having an epidural can kind of slow down the process for a lot of different reasons because you aren't feeling the pain, which is why you'd want the epidural. You aren't in tune with your body's natural instincts. You're kind of detached from what is going on with your body. So you're not going to be intuitively doing these different things to progress your labor, like moving around and whatnot. And again, having restricted movement, it's not that it will necessarily slow down your labor, but it kind of makes sense. You know, if you're not moving around, you're just laying there, things are naturally just going to go at a slower rate, especially if you're lying on your back on the bed. Studies show that's actually kind of the worst position you could be in to give birth to a baby or to labor, because you're not using gravity and your bodies are just kind of made to move and to cope with the labor pains with movement. Another benefit of not having an epidural is you are more likely to avoid having a C-section. Of course, there are different scenarios where it is medically necessary to have a C-section, but having an epidural is kind of just part of this chain reaction that can happen with different interventions during birth, because you're interfering with your body's natural way of doing things. There's all these incredible mechanisms with hormones and everything that help progress our labor, and when we kind of get our hands in that, it's just more likely to end in a C-section. And there are lots of ways this can happen, and ways that the doctor could end up saying, hey, you need a C-section. For instance, one of the ways an epidural can be more likely to lead to a C-section is, like I mentioned, is the labor being prolonged. And lots of times the doctors just don't want to wait around with you in labor, even though it's very normal and natural historically for women to be in labor for days. They would always rather preemptively kind of get their hands in the situation and opt for a C-section lots of times to reduce risk of things going wrong and all the kind of legal risks of things going wrong. They'd rather just cover their backs and just clean things up and have you get a C-section. I'm not saying that's the case in every situation. So if your body is kind of taking its time, which it's more likely to do if you have an epidural because you're not working with your body's natural mechanisms to encourage labor, it can take longer if you have an epidural, and that could lead to doctors wanting to preemptively offer a C-section to reduce any risk of complications or infection. So statistically, if you do not opt for pain medication, you actually are more likely to end up with a natural vaginal birth. The last reason is probably my favorite, and I think it's why most women opt to have a natural childbirth. And it's just that you want to take it on and see what your body can do, see what you're capable of, and what this whole birth thing is about in its raw state. There is something about being totally raw and present and experiencing your birth without any hindrances, without any medication, just as it's made to be. I've actually heard that overcoming the pain and the trial of childbirth is something that can really mentally help prepare a woman for becoming a mother, because it's just the fact that she can tackle this insane thing that seems impossible, and then you're just launched into motherhood. I definitely feel like it had that empowering effect for me. Like, if I can do this, I can do anything. And lots of times in motherhood, you do need that kind of mindset, because motherhood is not easy. It's not an easy feat. And lastly, I guess I just want to end with why not. You can always opt for it down the line for the most part. Why not just try and see what your body can do? Why not just embrace how your body was designed to work and just see if you can do it. Thank you for watching this. Let me know if you learned something down below. And if you want to have a natural childbirth or did, I want to know what was the main reason you wanted to have a natural childbirth. Let us know down in the comments below. And I have a whole bunch of videos I think you'd enjoy on how to manage pain during childbirth. I have 2 birth stories, both natural, one in a hospital and one in a birth center, and both went very differently. I just have a bunch of encouraging videos if you're looking for some positive motivation about how to have a natural childbirth. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, and I'd love to have you subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I love you so much. I hope you have a beautiful day and a beautiful birth experience, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!